The windshield wipers were moving as fast as they could, but they still couldn't keep up with the rain. Sheets of water slammed against my truck so hard that the road ahead disappeared every few seconds. Lightning flashed across the Kentucky mountains, turning the empty highway white for an instant before everything fell back into darkness. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and glanced at the dashboard clock. 9:03 p.m. Normally, I would never drive these back roads in weather like this. But tonight wasn't normal. For 3 days, my mother hadn't answered a single phone call. That may not sound strange to some people, but if you knew my mom, you'd understand why it terrified me. My mother, Helen Carter, was 76 years old. Every morning before sunrise, she woke up to make homemade fried chicken that she sold outside the Maple Ridge Farmers Market. She never missed church. She never forgot a birthday. Even if she only had $10 left, she'd somehow spend 5 of them buying cookies for her grandchildren. She believed family came before everything. So when someone like her suddenly disappeared, you didn't wait. You went looking. My sister Laura kept telling me I was overreacting. "Daniel, Mom is fine," she'd said during our last phone call. "She's staying with us for a while. She's resting. Stop worrying." She sounded calm. Too calm. Every question I asked was answered with another excuse. She's sleeping. She forgot to charge her phone. She's watching TV. She's tired. At first, I tried to believe her. After all, I had been working in Detroit for the past 5 months, taking every overtime shift I could get. I hated being so far away from home, but after my divorce, I needed a fresh start. The construction company offered good money, and Mom was the one who convinced me to take it. "Don't worry about me," she'd laugh before I left. "I'm tougher than these old bones look." That was my mother. Strong. Independent. Too proud to ask anyone for help. But something kept bothering me. Every Sunday, Mom always sent our family group chat a picture of her breakfast. Usually it was biscuits, eggs, and coffee sitting on the same little kitchen table Dad had built over 40 years ago. Then she would record a short voice message. "Good morning, babies. Don't work too hard today." It didn't matter if we were 40, 5, or 15. We were still her babies. This week, nothing. Not one picture, not one message, not even a simple thumbs up. Instead, Laura filled the family chat with pictures of herself, standing inside what looked like a brand new living room. New leather couches, a huge television, fresh hardwood flooring. Then came another picture. Her husband Brian stood beside a shiny red pickup truck, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. I stared at those pictures for a long time. Brian hadn't kept a steady job in nearly 2 years. Last Christmas he borrowed money from Jason, our younger brother. 6 months earlier he'd borrowed money from me. Neither of us had ever seen it again. So where had all this money suddenly come from? The more I thought about it, the less everything made sense. By Thursday afternoon, I couldn't focus on work anymore. I called Mom 7 more times, straight to voicemail. I called Laura. She answered after the 4th ring. "Daniel." "What now?" "I want to talk to Mom." "I told you she's asleep. It's 2 in the afternoon." "So, wake her up." "No." The answer came so quickly that I sat there staring at my phone. "What do you mean, no?" "She needs rest. I'll only talk for 1 minute." I said no. Something in her voice made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It sounded afraid. That night I packed a small duffel bag, climbed into my truck, and started driving toward Kentucky without telling anyone. The rain began shortly after I crossed the state line. By the time I reached Maple Ridge, it had become one of the worst storms I'd seen in years. The road twisted through forests and abandoned farmland. There weren't many headlights out here, just darkness. Wind, rain, and my growing fear that I was already too late. I kept remembering the last real conversation I'd had with Mom. She'd called me after church about 3 weeks earlier. "How's Detroit treating you?" "It's work. You eating enough?" "I'm fine." "You sound tired." "I am." She laughed softly. "You always think you have to carry the whole world yourself." "I learned that from you." "No," she'd replied. "I learned the hard way. I was hoping you'd learn differently." Those turned out to be the last words she ever said to me. Or at least, the last ones before everything changed. A bolt of lightning exploded somewhere nearby. For a split second, the entire mountainside lit up. That's when I noticed something strange. Near the old abandoned gravel quarry, there was a section of muddy ground that looked disturbed. Almost as if a truck had driven off the road recently. I slowed down. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was imagining things. Then, over the sound of the rain, I heard it, a faint voice, so weak that I almost convinced myself it was just the wind. I rolled down my window. There it was again. "Please." Every muscle in my body froze. I slammed on the brakes so hard the truck skidded sideways. Heart pounding, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the freezing rain. Only thunder answered. I pushed through waist-high grass, slipping in thick mud that grabbed my boots with every step. Rusted metal sheets and broken concrete were scattered everywhere from the old quarry that had closed years ago. "Hello?" I shouted. "Can anyone hear me?" Nothing. I took another few steps. Then, "Daniel." I stopped breathing. No one else in the world said my name that way. Only one person stretched the second syllable just a little. "Dani, my mother." Oh my God. I sprinted toward the sound, ignoring the rain hitting my face. The flashlight beam danced wildly across piles of rock until it landed on a deep drainage pit hidden behind thick weeds. I looked down. Everything inside me shattered. My mother lay curled against the cold dirt, wrapped in a soaked shawl. She wasn't moving. Her gray hair was plastered across her face. There was dried blood on her forehead. Her hands were torn open. She wasn't wearing shoes. For one horrifying second, I thought she was already dead. Then her fingers moved, barely. "My boy." My knees nearly gave out. "Mum." I searched desperately for a safe way down, but found only an old rusted chain bolted into the concrete wall. Without thinking, I grabbed it. The metal cut into my palms as I climbed. I slipped twice. My shoulder smashed against the wall. I didn't feel any of it. The only thing that mattered was reaching her. When I finally dropped beside her, she slowly opened her eyes. Tears mixed with the rain running down her face. "I knew," she whispered. "I knew you'd come." I wrapped my arms around her trembling body. She felt impossibly light, ice cold, like she'd been lying there forever. "I'm here now," I whispered, fighting back tears. "I've got you. I thought—" She struggled to breathe. "I thought nobody was ever coming." I held her tighter. And as the rain poured into that forgotten pit, I made one silent promise. Whoever had done this, whoever had left my 76-year-old mother here to die out, they were about to discover that they hadn't just attacked an old woman. They had declared war on her son. I couldn't stop shaking. Not because of the freezing rain. Not because my hands were bleeding from climbing down that rusted chain. I was shaking because I couldn't understand how this had happened. The woman I was holding wasn't just my mother. She was the strongest person I had ever known. She had survived losing my father to cancer. She had worked double shifts, sold homemade meals, cleaned houses, and somehow raised 3 children without ever making us feel poor. And now, she looked so fragile that I was terrified she might slip away in my arms before I could get her to safety. "Mum." I gently brushed the wet hair away from her face. "I'm getting you out of here." She tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. "I knew," she whispered. "I kept praying you'd come." Those words cut deeper than anything else, because they meant she'd been waiting for someone, anyone. For how long? I looked around the pit. broken branches, empty soda cans, sharp rocks, pieces of rusted metal. There was no way an elderly woman could have climbed out by herself. Whoever left her here knew exactly what they were doing. "Hold on," I said. "I'm going to get help." She weakly grabbed my wrist. "Don't leave. I'm not leaving you. I promise." I pulled off my jacket and wrapped it around her shaking shoulders before climbing halfway back up the chain. My phone barely had 1 bar of signal. I dialed 911. No connection. I climbed higher. Still nothing. The storm had knocked out most of the towers. My heart pounded harder. No, come on. I walked several yards through the rain until one tiny signal bar appeared. I hit call. "This is 911. What's your emergency?" "My mother's trapped in an abandoned quarry outside Maple Ridge." The operator immediately became alert. "Is she conscious?" "Barely." "Can she breathe?" "Yes, but she's freezing. She's been here for days." "Stay with her. Rescue teams are on the way." A daze. Even hearing myself say it out loud made it feel more horrifying. I climbed back into the pit. Mom was staring upward at the rain falling from the dark sky. "It's beautiful," she whispered. I blinked. "What? The rain?" She smiled weakly. "I never thought I'd see it again." I had to turn my face away for a second. I couldn't let her see me cry. Nearly 20 minutes passed before I heard the sound of an approaching diesel engine. Not an ambulance, a logging truck. I ran toward the road, waving both arms. The driver slammed on his brakes. What happened? "My mother's trapped." Without asking another question, the man jumped out. "My name's Earl." Together we grabbed ropes, chains, and a steel-toe strap from his truck. 2 more drivers stopped after seeing our headlights. Within minutes, 4 complete strangers were risking their own safety to save my mother. I never even learned all of their names, but I'll never forget their faces. One of them climbed into the pit beside me. Another secured the rope around an old oak tree. Slowly, painfully, we lifted Mom toward the surface. Every few feet she cried out in pain. I kept apologizing. I'm sorry. I'm hurting you." She squeezed my hand. "No, you came." 40 exhausting minutes later, we finally reached the top. The ambulance arrived almost at the same moment. Paramedics rushed toward us. What happened? I don't know. Actually, that wasn't true. Deep down, I already knew. This wasn't an accident. Someone had put her there. Inside the ambulance, they wrapped heated blankets around her while checking her pulse. One paramedic looked at me. "Are you family?" "I'm her son." "When was the last time anyone saw her?" I swallowed hard. "I thought she was staying with my sister." The paramedic exchanged a quick glance with his partner. Neither of them said anything. They didn't have to. We all knew something wasn't right. The county emergency clinic wasn't far away. I refused to leave Mom's side. Doctors worked quickly. Warm IV fluids, oxygen, blood tests, X-rays. I paced the hallway while listening to muffled voices behind the treatment room door. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, an older physician walked out. "You Daniel Carter." "Wes." "I'm Dr. Wilson." His expression told me everything before he even opened his mouth. "Your mother is lucky to be alive." My knees nearly buckled. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, a cracked rib, multiple bruises, several deep cuts. He paused. "She also hasn't eaten properly in days." I stared at him. "She didn't fall in there tonight." "No." He folded his arms. "In my professional opinion, your mother has been trapped there for approximately 3 days. 3 days, 72 hours, alone, hungry, cold, praying someone would hear her." I thanked the doctor before walking into the hallway. There was only one call left to make. I dialed Laura. She answered almost immediately. "Daniel." "Where's Mom?" "She's sleeping." Her answer came without hesitation. Exactly like before. I closed my eyes. "What?" I asked. "Where Mom is." "I told you." I cut her off. "No." My voice had become strangely calm. So I'm going to ask one last time. We're, or our mother. Silence. Then she sighed. Why are you acting like this? I looked through the glass window into Mom's hospital room. She lay connected to machines. Bandages covered her hands. Her face was bruised. She looked 20 years older than she had just 1 week ago. My chest burned with anger. That's strange, I said quietly. Because I'm standing beside her hospital bed. Another silence. Longer this time. Then I heard something I never expected. Laura stopped breathing for a second. What? I pulled Mom out of an abandoned quarry tonight. No response. She almost died. A still nothing. The silence stretched so long that I could hear only her breathing. Finally, very softly, she whispered, Daniel, I swear, I didn't know she was there. Those words hit me like another lightning strike. She didn't ask if Mom was okay. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't sound surprised that Mom had disappeared. Instead, she defended herself first. I didn't know she was there. My heart turned cold. Because innocent people don't begin with excuses. They begin with questions. I lowered my voice. Then tell me exactly where you thought she was. Alara started crying. Real crying. Broken. Panicked. But something inside me had already changed. The brother who always gave people the benefit of the doubt. The son who believed family would never betray family. He was disappearing. And in his place was someone determined to uncover every single lie. No matter where it led, even if it destroyed our family forever. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother lying at the bottom of that pit, soaked by freezing rain, whispering my name as if it were the last word she would ever say. The image refused to leave my mind. Around 6 the next morning, sunlight finally pushed through the hospital window. The storm had passed, but the darkness inside me hadn't. Mom was awake. Her skin had regained a little color, though she still looked exhausted. The bruises on her face seemed even worse in daylight. I gently squeezed her hand. How are you feeling? She gave me the same smile she'd given me my entire life whenever she didn't want me to worry. I've been better. You don't have to be strong anymore. She looked at me quietly. I know. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered something that changed everything. Brian did it. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. I knew it. She slowly nodded. I didn't fall. I know. He pushed me. My hands curled into fists. There it was. The truth. No more guessing. No more imagining worst-case scenarios. Someone had tried to kill my mother, and that someone was my own brother-in-law. I pulled my chair closer. Mom, tell me everything. She closed her eyes, taking a slow breath before beginning. I'd been staying with Laura and Brian for almost 2 months. I already knew why. Her blood pressure had become dangerously high earlier that spring, and Laura insisted it would be easier if Mom stayed with them until she recovered. At first, everything seemed normal. They were kind. Laura cooked. Brian even picked up my medicine. She smiled sadly. I thought maybe people really do become gentler as they get older. Then her expression changed. But it didn't last. She explained that Brian slowly began bringing up money almost every day, at breakfast, during dinner, while watching television, whenever Laura left the room. He'd ask about the farmhouse, the place where I grew up. My father had built most of it with his own hands before I was born. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family reunion, every memory I treasured began in that house. Brian apparently saw something else, money. He said developers wanted the land. He said it wasn't worth keeping anymore. He said old houses only cost money. I asked quietly, what did Laura say? Mom looked away. She didn't argue. That hurt almost as much as everything else. My sister had always been close to Mom. After Dad died, they spoke almost every day. How had things changed so completely? Mom continued. Brian kept saying $70,000 could change everyone's lives. He talked about vacations, paying debts, buying another house. He said I was selfish for refusing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Selfish. The woman who had sacrificed everything for us. I remembered being 10 years old when Mom sold her wedding ring to buy Jason asthma medication because insurance wouldn't cover it. She never told us. We found out years later. That was who she was. She gave. She sacrificed. She loved. And somehow, Brian had convinced himself she was the selfish one. Mom reached beneath her blanket and pulled out a small plastic evidence bag the nurse had left on her bedside table. Inside was an old photograph. My father stood beside the farmhouse wearing muddy work boots, smiling proudly with one arm around Mom. She looked at the picture for several seconds. He built that porch himself. He planted every apple tree. He said, no matter what happened, our children would always have a place to come home. A tear rolled down her cheek. I couldn't sell it. I just couldn't. I couldn't either. Not after hearing that. Not after remembering Dad spending entire weekends fixing fences while teaching me how to swing a hammer. That house wasn't wood and bricks. It was our family's history. Around mid-morning, Jason finally arrived. The moment he walked into the room, he wrapped Mom in the gentlest hug I'd ever seen. He didn't ask questions. He simply cried. I thought I'd lost you. Mom kissed his forehead. I'm still here. Barely. But she was. After the doctor finished another examination, Jason and I stepped into the hallway. His expression hardened. What are we doing? We're finding Brian. That's not enough. I know. Jason lowered his voice. If he did this, he belongs in prison. I agree. We contacted the county sheriff immediately. Within an hour, 2 detectives and an investigator arrived at the hospital. Mom repeated every detail she could remember. Brian had offered to drive her home. He bought her coffee on the way. He joked. He smiled. He acted like everything was normal. Then he suddenly turned off the main highway. She asked where they were going. He didn't answer. Instead, he drove toward the abandoned quarry. When they stopped, he looked directly at her and said, You've become the biggest problem in our lives. Mom's voice trembled. I thought he was joking. She wasn't. He opened my door. I grabbed my cane. He pulled me out. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to picture it, but I couldn't stop. He shoved me. I lost my balance. I remember falling. She reached up and touched the bandage on her forehead. I hit the rocks. When I looked up, he was standing above me. The hospital room became completely silent. He threw my shopping bag after me. Then he said, her voice broke, maybe after a few days down there, you'll finally understand that your daughter's future matters more than an old house. Jason slammed his fist against the wall. The detective immediately wrote everything down. One investigator asked, Did he threaten you before? Mom nodded slowly. He said one way or another, that house would belong to them. The room fell silent again. The detectives exchanged looks. This wasn't simply assault anymore. This was attempted murder. But just when I thought the truth couldn't get any worse, one of the nurses entered carrying a sealed evidence envelope. We recovered these. Inside were Mom's belongings, her broken glasses, a soaked wallet, a ruined Bible, and her water-damaged cell phone. The technician explained that although the phone had been underwater, some information might still be recoverable. The detectives immediately took it for forensic examination. At the time, I didn't think much about it. I believed we already had enough evidence. Mom's testimony, her injuries, the location, Brian's truck. I couldn't have been more wrong, because that cell phone wasn't just carrying photographs and contacts. It was carrying secrets. Secrets that would expose a betrayal far greater than Brian alone. That afternoon, Jason and I drove to Laura's house. The moment we pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. The red pickup truck was gone. So was Brian. Laura answered the door after nearly a minute. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were swollen. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. For a second, none of us spoke. Then she whispered, "How's Mom?" I stared at her. "You don't get to ask that first." She lowered her eyes. "I know. Where's Brian?" "I don't know." "When did you last see him?" "This morning." "What did he say?" She hesitated, then quietly answered, "He said he had to leave town for a few days." Jason laughed bitterly. Funny, almost like guilty people do. Alara began crying again. I didn't know he'd hurt her. I stepped closer. "Maybe. But you're going to tell us everything. Because if you hide even one more lie, I promise you, we'll uncover it ourselves." And neither of us realized that before the sun set that day, a forensic technician would unlock Mom's damaged phone and reveal a series of deleted messages that would shatter what remained of our family forever. The sheriff's office called just after sunset. I had barely finished a cup of stale hospital coffee when my phone buzzed. "Mr. Carter, this is Detective Hayes. We've recovered data from your mother's cell phone." Something in his voice told me this wasn't just another update. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Jason insisted on coming with me. Neither of us spoke during the drive. The silence between us wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. We both knew the investigation had only scratched the surface. When we arrived at the sheriff's office, Detective Hayes led us into a small conference room. A laptop sat open on the table. Beside it was a stack of printed photographs and several evidence bags. The detective folded his hands. "Your mother's phone was badly damaged by water. We couldn't recover everything. But we recovered enough." He turned the laptop toward us. "I think you should prepare yourselves." My stomach tightened. On the screen appeared a series of deleted text messages. Some had been erased only days before. Others dated back nearly 3 months. The first messages were between Brian and someone listed simply as Azrael Ellis. "Laura, Brian, she's refusing to sell." Keep trying." Another message. "Brian, she still thinks that old farmhouse belongs to George." "Laura, she'll never let it go," said another. "Brian, the developer is getting impatient. Alorov will convince her." I felt sick. Those messages alone proved they had been planning something together. But then the detective scrolled farther down. The next messages became darker. "Brian, collectors showed up again today. Solara, how much do we owe now?" "Brian, almost 50,000. Solara, we can't lose everything." "Say Brian, then your mother has to sign bless." Jason slammed his fist onto the table. I knew it. Detective Hayes remained calm. "Keep reading." "Brian, she cried again today." "Solara, ignore it." "Brian, she says George would never forgive her." "Solara, George is dead." Those 4 words echoed inside my head. George is dead. That wasn't just cruel. That was my father she was talking about. The man who had spent his entire life protecting us. The detective continued scrolling. Several messages had timestamps from the day Mom disappeared. "Brian, she's packing to leave." "Lyra, stop her." "Brian, she won't listen." "Solara, do whatever you have to do." The room became completely silent. I couldn't breathe. Then came the final deleted message. "Brian, what if she tells Daniel?" Laura replied only seconds later. "Just make sure she never comes back to that house." No one spoke. Not me, not Jason, not even Detective Hayes. I read the message again and again, each time hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. My own sister had written those words. Whether she meant murder or abandonment didn't matter anymore. She had accepted the possibility that our mother would never return. I pushed my chair back so hard it nearly tipped over. "I need air." I walked outside into the cool evening. For several minutes I simply stood there staring into the parking lot. I remembered Laura at 8 years old. She used to hide behind Mom whenever thunderstorms rolled in. Mom would wrap a blanket around both of us and tell stories until we stopped being afraid. How had that little girl become this woman? Jason joined me. "No, okay. I don't think I ever will be." He nodded slowly. "I keep asking myself where we missed the signs. I don't know. Where we're all busy. We're all trusted them." Jason looked toward the sheriff's office. "I trusted Brian. So did I." The realization hurt. Brian had eaten at our table, celebrated birthdays with us, held our children, laughed with Dad before he passed away, all while quietly plotting to steal everything Mom had left. The next morning, investigators uncovered something even worse. Brian hadn't just wanted the farmhouse. He had already promised it to a real estate investor. The developer had offered over $70,000 for the land. But Brian had secretly agreed to sell it for much less if he received quick cash. He was desperate. The debts were crushing him. Sports gambling, credit cards, personal loans, private lenders. Everywhere investigators looked, they found another unpaid bill. The new pickup truck, financed, the expensive furniture, bought entirely on credit, the luxury television, never paid for. Even their apartment was 4 months behind on rent. Everything Laura had proudly shown us online had been nothing more than borrowed money. A perfect life built on lies. Detective Hayes handed me another folder. This came from the county clerk. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document. At first glance it looked official. Then I saw my mother's signature, or rather, a fake version of it. Power of attorney. My heart stopped. Brian had forged paperwork, giving himself authority over Mom's property. Another page showed an inked fingerprint beside the signature. The forensic examiner shook his head. "I wasn't voluntarily given. It appears the fingerprint was lifted while she was asleep or unconscious." Jason cursed under his breath. "So this was planned." "For months," the detective answered. "It didn't begin at the quarry. It began long before that. Every new piece of evidence painted the same picture. This wasn't a crime of anger. It was a carefully planned betrayal, one step at a time. Pressure, manipulation, forgery, isolation, then, finally, attempted murder. That afternoon, Laura voluntarily came to the sheriff's office. She looked completely different from the confident woman posting smiling family photos just days earlier. Her hair was unwashed. Her eyes were swollen. She looked exhausted. The detective asked if I wanted to sit in during her interview. I agreed. Laura entered the room slowly. When she saw me, she immediately burst into tears. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. She sat down across from us. Detective Hayes placed printed copies of the text messages on the table. "Are these yours?" She stared at them, then quietly nodded.
Les?
"No les." He pointed toward the last message. "Make sure she never comes back to that house." "What did you mean?" Laura covered her face. I thought. She began crying harder. "I thought Brian would scare her. I thought he'd leave her somewhere until she agreed to sell." Jason exploded. "You thought abandoning a 76-year-old woman was acceptable?" "No, I didn't think." "Exactly," Jason snapped. "You didn't think." Laura continued sobbing. "I never believed he'd try to kill her." Detective Hayes leaned forward. "Messes. Mitchell, whether you intended it or not, your messages encouraged the crime." She nodded. "I know. And I'll live with that forever." For the first time since all of this began, I saw genuine regret in her eyes. But regret couldn't erase what had happened. It couldn't erase 3 nights in a freezing pit. It couldn't erase the terror in Mom's voice. It couldn't erase the image that would haunt me for the rest of my life. As Laura was escorted from the interview room, she stopped beside me. She whispered only 4 words. "I lost my family." I looked directly into her eyes. "No, you threw it away." And before the week was over, Brian would finally be found hundreds of miles away, still carrying the forged documents that proved he had never intended to stop until my mother lost everything, including her life. Brian was arrested 2 days later. The call came just before sunrise. I had spent the night sleeping in a chair beside Mom's hospital bed when Detective Hayes quietly walked into the room. "Wool found him." Those 3 words carried more relief than I expected. "We're a bus terminal outside Detroit." For a moment I simply stared at him. Brian hadn't gone into hiding near Maple Ridge. He had tried to run hundreds of miles away, hoping distance would erase what he'd done. It wouldn't. Detective Hayes continued. "He was carrying nearly $12,000 in cash. The original deed to your mother's farmhouse, the forged power of attorney, and a suitcase packed for a long trip." Jason let out a bitter laugh. "So he really planned to disappear." The detective nodded. "He also had a burner phone. We recovered conversations with 2 potential buyers willing to purchase the property immediately for cash. So even after abandoning your mother, he was still trying to sell her home." I looked toward Mom. She had heard every word. She closed her eyes for a long moment before quietly saying, "Money changes some people." Then she slowly shook her head. "No, it doesn't change them. It reveals them." The criminal case moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Security camera footage showed Brian driving toward the abandoned quarry. Gas station receipts matched the timeline. His phone records placed him exactly where Mom had described. The forged legal documents were confirmed by handwriting experts. Most damaging of all, Laura agreed to testify. She admitted everything. She confessed that Brian had spent months convincing her that selling the farmhouse would solve all of their financial problems. He blamed every unpaid bill on Mom, every debt, every argument, every failure. Little by little, Laura stopped seeing her mother as the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. Instead, she began seeing only the property, only the money, only the solution. "I stopped thinking like a daughter," she told the court through tears. "I started thinking like someone drowning in debt." The judge looked directly at her. "Financial hardship explains poor decisions. It never excuses abandoning your humanity." Those words filled the courtroom with silence. Brian never showed real remorse. Even during the trial, he insisted everything had been a misunderstanding. "I never wanted her dead. I only wanted her to think." The prosecutor stood. "You left a 76-year-old woman injured in an abandoned drainage pit. You drove away. You never called for help. You never returned. You lied about where she was. You attempted to steal her property." He paused. "The only misunderstanding here is your belief that anyone would believe you." For the first time since his arrest, Brian had nothing to say. Weeks later, the verdict was announced: guilty, attempted murder, forgery, attempted property theft, abuse of an elderly adult, multiple additional financial crimes. The sentence was longer than anyone expected. As deputies led him away in handcuffs, he glanced toward Laura. She didn't look back. She simply lowered her head. That chapter of her life was finally over. To Laura's, consequences were different. Because she cooperated with investigators and admitted her role, the court considered her remorse. Even so, she lost almost everything. The apartment was repossessed. The pickup truck was sold. Most of their belongings disappeared to repay creditors. She accepted community service, financial penalties, and months of legal supervision. But none of those punishments hurt as much as losing her mother's trust. That wound couldn't be repaired by a judge, only by time. Several weeks after the trial, Mom finally returned home. Jason and I spent nearly every evening repairing the old farmhouse. We replaced broken porch boards, fixed the leaking roof, painted the walls bright white with fresh blue trim. Neighbors stopped by every day. Some brought flowers. Others brought homemade soup. A few simply came to sit on the porch and keep Mom company. For the first time in years, the old farmhouse felt alive again. When Mom walked through the front door, she rested one hand against the wall. Then she smiled. "I'm home." She walked into the living room, where Dad's photograph still rested on the mantel. Running her fingers across the frame, she whispered, "I kept my promise, George. I never gave up our home." I felt tears filling my eyes. Dad wasn't there, but somehow it felt like he had been watching over her the entire time. 2 months passed. Every Saturday morning, Laura quietly appeared at the farmhouse. She never came inside without permission. She never asked to be forgiven. She simply worked. She washed dishes, pulled weeds, drove Mom to doctor's appointments, helped cook fried chicken for the Sunday market. Week after week, month after month, without complaining, without asking for anything. One afternoon, after nearly 6 months, Mom finally spoke while they were preparing biscuits together. "Laura." "Les." "Mom, why do you keep coming?" Laura stopped kneading the dough. "Because I can't change what I did, but I can change who I become." Mom looked at her for a long time. Then she quietly nodded. "Keep proving it." That was all. There were no dramatic hugs, no magical reunion. Real healing doesn't happen in one conversation. It happens through countless small choices, day after day. Nearly a year later, I drove Mom past the old quarry. The county had permanently filled the pit with earth and sealed the entire area. Someone had placed a simple wooden cross beside the road. Fresh yellow flowers rested beneath it. Mom asked me to stop. She slowly walked over using her cane. For several minutes she simply stood there. Finally she smiled. "This is where they thought my story would end." I quietly answered, "But it didn't." She looked toward the mountains glowing beneath the evening sun. "No. Because there's a difference between being thrown into darkness and believing you belong there." Those words have stayed with me ever since. Today, Mom still wakes before sunrise every Sunday. She still makes her famous fried chicken. She still greets every customer with a smile. People sometimes ask her how she found the strength to move forward after such an unimaginable betrayal. She always gives the same answer. Forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. It's refusing to let evil decide how the rest of your story ends. Every time I hear her say that, I'm reminded of the night I almost lost her, the storm, the darkness, the desperate voice calling my name, and I realize something. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they're 76-year-old mothers who refuse to let hatred steal the life they've spent decades building. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't revenge. It's surviving long enough to prove that love, courage, and truth are stronger than greed. That is the lesson my mother gave me, and it's one I'll carry for the rest of my life. 5A story summary: a devoted son returns home after sensing that something is terribly wrong, only to discover his elderly mother abandoned in a remote quarry by the very people she trusted. As he uncovers a web of lies, greed, forged documents, and family betrayal, the truth leads to justice in court. While the guilty face the consequences of their actions, the family learns that trust, once broken, can only be rebuilt through sincere actions, not empty words. Harf story lesson: family is not defined by blood alone. True family protects you when you are at your weakest, stands beside you in your darkest moments, and chooses love over greed. Wealth can be replaced, but integrity, compassion, and trust are priceless. No matter how deep the pit life throws you into, never believe that you belong there. As long as you keep hope alive, your story is never over. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next emotional and inspiring story. Your support helps this channel continue bringing powerful stories to life. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and thank you for being here.